She woke to find Pups in her bed, not knowing it was the Alpha King's test to choose his Luna. The first light of dawn crept over the village of Eldon Hollow, spilling pale gold across the forest edges. Mist curled like smoke along the cobblestone paths, and the tall oaks whispered secrets in the gentle morning breeze. Alara stirred beneath her linen blanket, eyelids heavy with sleep. She had spent the night tending to the sick herbs in her small wooden home, yet exhaustion seemed to cling to her bones. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting the quiet, empty room she had left behind the night before. But something was different. Her gaze fell upon a small, soft bundle in the corner of her bed. At first, she thought it was a stray cloth or perhaps a shadow cast by the flickering candle. Then a tiny, wet nose twitched, followed by high, fragile whines. Ilara froze. The bundle shifted. Pups. Four small, trembling wolf pups stared up at her with wide, glimmering eyes. Their fur was silvery gray, with streaks of black like shadowed smoke, and they huddled together, shivering, as if seeking warmth from the unknown. "What? How did you get here?" she whispered, her voice catching. Her mind raced. Wolves in Eldon Hollow were rarely seen outside the deeper woods, and wolves this small, they were too young to have wandered on their own. She hesitated, then reached forward, letting her hand hover above the pups. They looked at her with a strange intelligence, a silent plea. Instinct took over. She scooped one into her arms, feeling its tiny heart beating wildly. The other pups scrambled closer, nudging her for warmth. Ilara's chest tightened. She could not leave them alone, not like this. She carried them to a small basket she kept for emergencies and wrapped them in a blanket. Their whines softened, settling into gentle sighs as she hummed a quiet tune her mother had taught her long ago. Yet even as she soothed them, an uneasy thought flickered in the back of her mind. Who could have left these pups here? Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying a faint scent of iron and pine. Something ancient lingered in the air, a presence that made the hairs on her arms rise. Ilara shivered. It was then she noticed the faint scratches on her window sill, too deliberate to be random. Her heart beat faster. Wolves were clever, but this felt like a message. And in the distance, high above the village, she swore she saw a shadow moving along the cliffs, a figure tall, regal, and impossibly still. His eyes, if he had eyes, seemed to pierce through the morning mist. A shiver ran down her spine, and she felt a pull she could not explain. Ilara shook her head and returned to the pups. They needed her. That was certain. And yet, an uneasy sense of destiny brushed against her like the whispering wind outside her window. The village of Eldon Hollow was quiet at this hour. Only the faint clatter of a cart delivering morning supplies broke the stillness. Ilara wrapped the pups tighter and carried them to the small wooden tub she used for bathing herbs. She filled it with warm water, murmuring softly to keep the pups calm. As she cleaned them, she noticed something strange. One of the pups, the smallest, had a faint silver marking on its forehead, shaped almost like a crescent moon. Ilara frowned. She had seen symbols like this in the old stories, tales her grandmother had whispered by the fire, marks that belonged to the Alpha King's wolves, creatures of power bound to the royal pack. People said they were nearly impossible to touch, let alone tame, unless one had a heart strong and pure enough to withstand the king's trials. Her hands trembled as she lifted the pup, brushing the silvery fur gently. "Are you one of his?" she whispered, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. The pup blinked up at her, its tiny mouth opening in a quiet, insistent whine. It was as if it understood her words. A soft knock echoed at her door, startling her. Ilara froze, listening. No one in the village dared knock this early, especially not near her little cottage at the edge of the woods. She approached cautiously. "Who is it?" she called softly. No answer, only the sound of shifting shadows outside. Her pulse quickened. Grabbing the basket of pups, she moved to the window, peering through the thin curtain. The mist seemed heavier near the tree line, swirling unnaturally as if it had a life of its own. And then she saw him clearly, a man, standing tall and silent at the edge of the forest. His presence was commanding yet eerie like the moon reflected on dark water. Alara stumbled back, clutching the pups. The figure remained still, his gaze fixed on her home. There was no question in her mind. He was not ordinary. This was someone of great power. Someone dangerous. And yet, strangely, she did not feel fear. The man finally turned, his movements deliberate, graceful, almost predatory. And in that moment, Alara understood, deep in her bones, that the pups were not an accident. They had been placed here for her. For her. The thought was as thrilling as it was terrifying. Her hands shook as she held the pups closer, heart pounding. She had heard the old stories, legends whispered by traveling merchants and wandering sages. The Alpha King chose his Luna through trials, tests of courage, wisdom, and heart. And the chosen one often did not even know she had been chosen until the trials began. Her breath caught in her throat. Could this be that moment? Her mind raced. She was just a healer from a quiet village, not someone powerful or noble. How could she possibly be part of the king's world? And yet, she felt the pull of fate, subtle and irresistible, like a river pulling her downstream. She glanced at the pups again. They were not ordinary, she realized. Their eyes shone with a strange light, and when she spoke to them, it was as if they listened, not just with ears but with understanding. One of the pups nudged her hand with its tiny nose, almost demanding attention. She laughed nervously. "All right," she murmured. "I don't know who sent you or why, but we'll get through this together." She settled the pups back into the basket, ensuring they were warm and comfortable. Then finally, she sat at her wooden table and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her hands rested on the worn surface, still tingling from holding the creatures. And then she heard it, a faint whisper, soft and almost imperceptible, carried on the wind. "The king watches, choose wisely, healer." Alara's blood ran cold. She froze, her eyes darting around the small cottage. The mist outside seemed to pulse with the words, and for a moment she could have sworn the pups looked at her knowingly, as if they understood the warning. She swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. This was no ordinary morning, and these were no ordinary pups. She spent the day tending to them, feeding and cleaning, all the while feeling the strange weight of destiny pressing upon her. She could not shake the feeling that every rustle in the trees, every bird call, and even the soft whine of the pups carried meaning. By evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest grew darker, shadows stretching like living things across the village. Alara had just finished settling the pups for the night when a soft, deliberate knock echoed again at her door. Her pulse quickened. This is not happening," she whispered to herself. She opened the door cautiously. The figure stood there, tall and imposing even in the dim light. His presence filled the small space, commanding and terrifying. Yet when he spoke, his voice was low, smooth, and impossible to ignore. "You have shown kindness," he said simply, eyes glinting like steel in the twilight. "But kindness alone is not enough." Alara's breath caught. Who are you?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "I am Kalen," he replied, his gaze flicking toward the pups nestled in the basket. "Alpha of this land, and these," he gestured toward the pups, "are a test, one I have been watching closely." Her mind spun. The Alpha King, the legend, her pulse raced. She had heard of him, ruthless, cold, feared by all who lived in the shadows of the forest. And yet standing here he seemed human, vulnerable in ways the stories never described. You watched me," she whispered, feeling a mix of fear and awe. He nodded, the faintest shadow of a smile brushing his lips. "Yes, and tomorrow the true trial begins. You will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine. Your heart, your courage, your choices. Only then will I know if you are worthy to become my Luna." Alara felt her knees weaken. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged with destiny. She glanced at the pups again. They whimpered softly, pressing closer to her. Their tiny forms seemed to hum with a strange energy, as if affirming the Alpha's words. And as she looked up at Kalen, standing like a shadowed sentinel in the fading light, Alara realized she had no choice but to accept the unknown path that lay ahead. Somewhere deep inside, she knew, her life would never be the same again. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a single, chilling sound, the echo of the Alpha King's wolves howling across the cliffs. And in the moonlight, one of the pups stirred, its small voice breaking the silence in a way no ordinary wolf could. The trials begin, healer. Alara held her breath, and the night waited, silent and expectant, for the dawn that would bring the first step of her destiny. The dawn broke over Eldon Hollow with a quiet intensity. Mist lingered between the trees like silver threads, curling around the roots and the cobblestone paths. Alara sat in her small cottage, staring at the basket of pups she had tended for the past night. They slept peacefully, unaware that their presence had changed her life forever. The soft sound of hooves echoed across the path outside. Alara's heart tightened, a familiar unease stirring in her chest. She stepped to the window, parting the curtain slightly. There at the edge of the forest stood the Alpha King's emissary, a tall, broad-shouldered figure clad in dark leather, with eyes sharp as blades. Behind him, the morning mist swirled strangely, almost as if it moved to his command. A quiet knock sounded at her door, and the figure entered without waiting for permission. His presence filled the small room, imposing yet strangely gentle. "Alara," he said, his voice deep, calm, and commanding, "the Alpha King requests your presence. It is time for your first trial." Alara's stomach tightened. She had heard the stories of those summoned to the castle. Many never returned. Yet something in her chest refused to yield to fear. She nodded silently, gathering the pups and securing them in a safe basket. The emissary's eyes softened ever so slightly at her determination. The journey to the castle was quiet, the carriage gliding over forest paths shrouded in mist. Alara's mind raced with questions. What kind of trial awaited her? Could she truly face the Alpha King himself? And what would become of the pups, the creatures that had awakened something deep within her heart? The castle appeared suddenly through the mist, a dark silhouette of stone and shadow perched atop the cliffs. Towers reached toward the sky, their peaks shrouded in fog. Windows glimmered faintly with candlelight, like distant stars. The massive gates opened before the carriage as if anticipating her arrival, creaking slowly to reveal the courtyard within. Kalen, the Alpha King, awaited her. His presence was overwhelming, the power and authority in every motion undeniable. His eyes, dark and piercing, studied her with a mix of curiosity and calculation. He wore the weight of centuries in his stance, a king bound not just by rule but by the invisible chains of his own past. "Alara," he said, stepping forward, his gaze fixed on her. "You have shown kindness to those who depend on you, yet this is only the beginning. The true test of a Luna is not in comfort but in courage, wisdom, and heart. Are you prepared to face what lies ahead?" Alara swallowed hard. Her voice trembled, yet she answered with quiet resolve. I will do what I must." Kalen nodded, and the first trial began. The trial was deceptively simple. She was led through the castle corridors, each hallway lined with intricate carvings depicting the history of the Alpha King's pack. The walls seemed alive, shadows twisting and curling as if watching her every move. The castle was a maze, but more than that, it was a test of her patience and perception. In the first chamber, she encountered a wounded wolf lying in a shallow pool of silver light. Its leg was caught in a snare, and it trembled in fear. Alara knelt carefully, her hands steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. The wolf growled softly, a warning that the slightest misstep would be met with sharp teeth. Yet she spoke to it in gentle tones, humming the tune her mother had taught her as she worked to free it. The wolf's eyes, once wild with fear, softened as she treated the wound. Alara realized that this was not merely a test of skill but of heart. Could she extend kindness to a creature that might harm her? Could she remain calm under fear? She did not falter. Kalen observed from the shadows, his expression unreadable. Though he had faced countless warriors, leaders, and challengers, he found himself intrigued by her quiet bravery. There was no grand display of magic or strength in this act, only patience, empathy, and resolve. And yet, it spoke of something deeper than any sword or spell could. The next chamber tested her wisdom. A series of doors lined the hall, each marked with strange symbols that shimmered faintly in the torchlight. An inscription above read, "Choose the path of truth or be lost to the shadow." Alara hesitated, studying the symbols. Each seemed to whisper possibilities, some promising comfort, others danger. Her mind raced as she recalled the stories of those who had faced the king's trials before her. Many had been deceived by the lure of power or the promise of safety. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She focused not on fear, but on the truth she carried within her, her desire to protect, to care, and to do what was right. Slowly, she reached out and touched a door marked with a simple crescent moon, the symbol she had seen on the smallest pup's forehead. The door swung open silently, revealing a dimly lit corridor leading deeper into the castle. A soft growl echoed from behind, but she did not turn. The choice had been hers, guided by instinct and heart. As the day passed, the trials grew more challenging. Alara faced enchanted traps that tested her courage, illusions that preyed on her fears, and puzzles that demanded both logic and empathy. Each obstacle seemed designed not just to challenge her body, but her spirit. At one point, she entered a chamber filled with shadows that whispered her deepest doubts. "You are not strong enough. You do not belong here. The king will never accept you," the voices hissed, curling around her like smoke. Alara's heart raced, but she stood firm. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I am here. I will do what is right. I will not let fear guide me." The shadows recoiled at her defiance, swirling into nothingness. A quiet voice, deep and commanding, echoed in the chamber. "Courage is born not of strength, but of resolve. You understand this, healer." Kalen's eyes appeared at the edge of the shadows, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He stepped forward, his dark cloak flowing like liquid night. "You are remarkable," he said softly, almost unexpectedly. "Few could endure what you have faced today." Alara's gaze met his, and in that moment she glimpsed the man behind the legend, the lonely, burdened king who had ruled with fear yet yearned for trust. Something stirred in her chest, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and something she could not name. The final challenge of the day was a test of moral courage. In a chamber lit by flickering lanterns, she found a single pup, one she did not recognize, trapped in a cage above a slowly rising pool of water. Below, a trap door loomed, threatening to plunge the pup into the flood. A scroll lay on a pedestal beside the cage, inscribed with the words, "Only one may be saved. Choose who you protect." Alara's heart clenched. She looked at the pup, then at the basket she had carried all day, where the others slept. Every instinct screamed to save them all, yet she understood the trial's cruel lesson. This was not about skill or speed. It was about the courage to make a choice when there was no perfect answer. She knelt, brushing the pup's wet fur. "I will not let fear guide me," she whispered. Carefully, she studied the mechanism of the trap, tracing the ropes and levers. With steady hands and a clear mind, she managed to free the pup, ignoring the voice in her head that whispered doubt. The floodwaters remained at bay and the cage swung open. Kalen stepped from the shadows, his expression unreadable. "You have shown wisdom and courage, yet your heart is what makes you extraordinary," he said, voice low and almost reverent. Alara's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the pull of something ancient and powerful. She did not understand fully what it meant, but she sensed that she had moved one step closer to the path fate had laid before her. Night fell over the castle, and Alara was led to a small chamber with a window that looked out over the cliffs. The wind howled softly, carrying the cries of distant wolves. She settled the pups into a soft blanket, watching as their small forms curled together in sleep. Kalen appeared silently in the doorway. The firelight cast long shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp planes and deep intensity of his eyes. "You have done well," he said, his voice softer now, almost intimate. "Tomorrow the trials continue, but tonight rest. You will need your strength." Alara nodded, her thoughts a tangle of fear, wonder, and something far deeper she had not yet named. She felt the king's presence in the room, quiet yet insistent, a reminder of the journey she had begun. Before sleep claimed her, she glanced at the pups one last time. The smallest one raised its head, looking at her with eyes that shimmered faintly in the firelight. A soft whisper drifted through her mind. "The king watches. Your heart has been seen, but the path is not over." "Be ready," Alara's breath caught. She lay down beside the pups, closing her eyes, but sleep was distant. The castle seemed alive around her, full of shadows and secrets. Outside, the wind carried the mournful cry of a lone wolf, a reminder that her trials were only beginning. And somewhere in the highest tower of the castle, Kalen watched silently, the weight of centuries and the hope of finding his Luna pressing heavily on him. The night was long, and dawn would come again, bringing with it the next step of a journey that would test courage, heart, and destiny. The castle was quieter than usual that morning. Mist clung to the stone walls, curling around towers and staircases like living smoke. Alara walked slowly through the corridors, her fingers brushing against the cold, carved stones. Every corner seemed to hum with history, every shadow whispering secrets of the Alpha King's lineage. She carried the pups carefully in a soft blanket, their small bodies warm and alive against her chest. Though they were asleep, she felt their subtle movements, their quiet energy pulsing like tiny hearts connected to her own. They had become her companions, her guides, and perhaps even her protectors. Her thoughts were tangled with questions. The trials had tested her courage, her wisdom, and her heart, but she sensed that the true challenge, the one that would touch her very soul, was yet to come. And somehow, she knew the Alpha King, Kaelin, would be at the center of it. The king appeared without warning in the corridor ahead, his dark cloak brushing the floor. His presence was immediate, commanding, and yet strangely gentle in its intensity. "Alara," he said, his voice a low echo that seemed to vibrate through the stones, "you have done well. The trials of the heart are complete, but now you must face the truth of the Alpha and the darkness that comes with it." Alara's pulse quickened. She had glimpsed his humanity before in moments when he had been quietly observant or unexpectedly gentle. But this felt deeper, something heavy like centuries of pain and solitude pressed against him. "Truth?" she asked, her voice soft. "What truth?" Kalen gestured for her to follow him down a spiral staircase that led deep into the heart of the castle. Torchlight flickered against the walls, revealing carvings of wolves in mid-leap, of kings and queens standing proud and powerful. At the base of the staircase lay a cavernous hall, its floor covered in ancient runes that pulsed faintly with silver light. "This is the Hall of Shadows," Kalen explained. "It holds the history of my lineage, and the curse that has followed us for generations. Any Luna who does not understand it will bring ruin upon the pack, and yet, even in darkness, the heart may shine." Alara stepped cautiously, her gaze drawn to the runes beneath her feet. She felt the power in them, subtle yet overwhelming, like the pulse of the forest itself. The pup stirred in her arms, tiny heads lifting as if sensing the weight of the place. Kalen's eyes softened ever so slightly as he approached. "This curse," he said, "has claimed many who sought to rule by fear or strength alone. It feeds on loneliness, sorrow, and mistrust. My Lunas have often failed because they could not see beyond the shadow, but perhaps you are different." Alara swallowed hard. She had never felt so small and yet so aware of her own courage. I want to help. I want to understand." Kalen's gaze lingered on her, piercing and unreadable. "Understanding is not enough," he murmured. "You must feel it. You must face it. Only then will the path to Luna open fully." The first test of this deeper trial was one of fear and illusion. A soft mist rose from the ruins, enveloping the hall, and suddenly Alara found herself standing alone in a forest much like the one outside her village, but twisted. Trees bent unnaturally, shadows moved on their own, and the wind carried whispers that sounded like voices she had never heard yet somehow recognized. From the mist emerged figures, wolves and humans alike, but they were distorted, reflecting her deepest fears. One figure stepped forward, a version of Kalen but cruel and distant, his eyes cold and accusing. "You are not worthy," the illusion said, voice like ice. "You cannot bear the burden of the pack. You will fail and all will suffer." Alara's chest tightened. Her instinct was to run, to hide, but the pups stirred in her arms, their soft whines grounding her. She took a deep breath and met the illusion's gaze. "I may not be perfect," she said steadily, "but I will not abandon what is right. I will face fear and I will protect those who cannot protect themselves." The illusion faltered, its form rippling and wavering. Kalen's real voice echoed through the mist. "Your courage, it is rare. Most would have fallen already." Alara's heart beat fast. She realized then that this trial was not about defeating the illusions with strength or cunning, but with heart and resolve. Every choice she made, every act of courage and kindness, weakened the darkness around her, pushing the mist back until it dissolved entirely. When the mist cleared, she found herself back in the hall, Kalen standing before her. His expression was softer, more human, yet a shadow of pain lingered in his eyes. "You see," he said quietly, "the curse is not only about danger or power, it is about the heart. Those who cannot face the pain of others or their own pain cannot survive it, and yet you have survived, healer." Alara felt a strange warmth in her chest. The trials had tested her body, mind, and now her spirit. She looked at Kalen, her voice trembling. I do not understand everything, but I feel that I must help you and the pack." Kalen's eyes softened further, but a shadow flickered across his face. "And yet, you do not know me fully," he said, almost a whisper. "I have done things that I regret. I have pushed away those I cared for because I feared loss. You must decide if you can trust me, even knowing the darkness I carry." Her hands tightened around the blanket holding the pups. I cannot promise I will understand everything," she admitted. "But I can promise I will try, and I will not abandon you." For a long moment they stood in silence. The hall seemed to hold its breath, the runes on the floor glowing faintly as if acknowledging her words. And in that silence, Alara felt the weight of destiny press upon her, an invisible tether connecting her heart to Kalen's. The next challenge came at twilight. Kalen led her to the castle gardens, where moonlight spilled across fountains and statues. The air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming flowers, and the soft rustle of leaves carried whispers of secrets. "You will meet the pack tonight," Kalen said. "They will test your heart as I have. They will challenge your courage and your loyalty. Some may mock you, some may doubt you, and some may test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. But the pups, your companions, will guide you." Alara's pulse quickened. The pack, the wolves of the Alpha King. She had seen them from afar, but never so close, never under the weight of expectation. Kalen gestured to the smallest pup, the one with the crescent moon on its forehead. It lifted its head, eyes glimmering with intelligence, and padded ahead, leading the way through the shadows. The wolves emerged silently from the darkness, their eyes reflecting moonlight like molten silver. They circled Alara, sniffing, observing, their movements both graceful and precise. Each wolf seemed to study her, searching for weakness, searching for truth. One wolf stepped forward, taller and darker than the rest. Its growl was low and commanding, challenging her presence. Alara swallowed her fear, kneeling to meet its gaze. "I am here to protect, to help, and to learn," she said softly, voice steady. I mean no harm." The wolf's ears twitched, and for a moment it seemed to hesitate. Then slowly it lowered its head, acknowledging her sincerity. The other wolves followed suit, one by one, until the pack circled her in quiet acceptance. Kalen watched from the edge of the garden, his expression unreadable. Yet there was a flicker of something softer in his eyes, a recognition that Alara had passed another test, not of strength but of heart. Night deepened and the wind carried a strange, haunting melody through the castle. The pups stirred in her arms, their small forms alert. Alara felt a pull toward the highest tower, a sense that the trials were far from over. She looked at Kalen, who had descended into the shadows of the garden. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "you will face the final truth. The curse is not only mine, it is the weight of every decision, every failure, every regret carried by those who have ruled before. Only when you face it fully will you understand your path as Luna." Alara's chest tightened. She had faced fear, illusion, and moral choice. She had met the pack and gained their cautious trust. And yet she felt the shadows still linger, deep within Kalen, within the castle, within herself. As she settled the pups in a small nest of blankets for the night, she could not shake the sense of destiny pressing against her. She felt the invisible threads that connected her to Kalen and to the pack, threads that were strong yet fragile, delicate yet unbreakable. Outside, the wind whispered through the cliffs, carrying the echo of a lone wolf's howl. Alara shivered, feeling it not as fear but as a call, an invitation to step further into the unknown, into a world where heart, courage, and destiny intertwined. And somewhere in the shadows of the castle, Kalen watched silently, the weight of his centuries-old curse pressing upon him. Yet for the first time in years, he allowed himself a flicker of hope, that perhaps this healer, this Luna in waiting, could not only survive the trials but also mend the loneliness that had haunted him for so long. The night stretched on, full of whispers, shadows, and secrets. And as the moon rose high over the cliffs, Alara felt a strange certainty settle in her heart. The hardest trials were yet to come, and the choices she would make could change not only her fate but the fate of the Alpha King and his entire pack. Dawn broke slowly over the castle, painting the stone walls in shades of rose and gold. The wind carried the scent of pine and frost, brushing against the towers like a quiet herald of the day to come. Alara stood on the highest balcony, the pups nestled at her feet, eyes bright and curious. She looked out over the cliffs, where the forest stretched endlessly, and felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her chest. Today, she would face the final trial. She had survived the tests of courage, wisdom, and heart, yet Kalen had warned her that the ultimate challenge would test not only her strength, but her spirit and the depth of her bond with the Alpha King. Kalen appeared silently behind her as he always did, his presence commanding yet calm. He wore a cloak that brushed the balcony floor, dark as midnight. His eyes, though filled with centuries of sorrow and responsibility, softened as they met hers. "The time has come, Alara," he said quietly. "The curse that has haunted my lineage, it is not a simple shadow. It is a weight born of loss, of fear, of choices made without hope. If you are to be my Luna, you must face it with me. Only together can it be broken." Alara nodded, her hands brushing the pup's fur. "I am ready," she whispered. The truth in her voice surprised her. She was not afraid. She had grown through the trials, and she understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Kalen led her through the castle gates to the Hall of Shadows, where the runes pulsed faintly in the morning light. The chamber seemed alive, as if waiting for them. The air was thick with anticipation, and the shadows twisted softly at the edges of her vision. "Step forward," Kalen instructed, his voice steady. "The curse will test you both. You must face the past, the regrets, and the loneliness that have held me for so long. Only by acknowledging it can it be lifted." The room grew darker, and the runes on the floor glowed brighter. The shadows shifted, forming images, memories of Kaelin's past, of Luna's who had failed, of choices made in desperation. Alara watched silently, feeling the weight of centuries pressing against her heart. She saw the moments of sorrow that had shaped the Alpha King, the loneliness that had hardened him, and the isolation that had kept him apart from those he might have loved. Kaelin's hand brushed hers briefly, grounding her. "Do not turn away," he said. "You must see it all not with judgment but with understanding." Alara's eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. She saw the pain, the loss, and the regrets. She felt the heaviness of Kaelin's burden, and in her heart a quiet strength blossomed. She realized that love, trust, and forgiveness were stronger than fear or sorrow. The shadows twisted violently, testing her resolve. They whispered doubts, taunted her with visions of failure, and threatened to overwhelm her. The pups whined softly, their small bodies pressing close, reminding her of the bond she had already formed, the compassion that had guided her through every trial. Alara stepped forward, holding her head high. "I see the pain, the fear, and the sorrow," she said firmly. "But I also see the courage, the strength, and the hope. I choose to face it with you, not alone, not with fear, but with heart." The shadows hesitated. Slowly they began to dissolve, the darkness lifting as if recognizing her words. Kaelin's eyes softened and he stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "Your heart, it is pure," he murmured. "It shines even in the darkness." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, haunting howl echoed through the castle, reverberating against the stone walls. The air thickened and the shadows flickered violently. The curse, sensing the challenge, had manifested a final obstacle, a spirit of sorrow, bound to the Alpha's lineage, a wraith of loneliness and despair. It emerged, a dark, twisting figure, its eyes hollow yet full of longing. Its voice was a soft, cruel echo. "You cannot break me. No Luna has ever endured what you face. You will fail, and he will remain alone as all before have done." Alara stood firm, drawing the pups close. "I will not let fear control me," she said. "We face this together, King and Luna, not alone, not with hatred, but with love and courage." Kaelin stepped beside her, his dark aura mingling with hers. Together, their presence radiated strength. He raised his hand, and a soft silver light flowed from the runes on the floor, swirling around them like a protective shield. The wraith hissed, recoiling against the purity of their combined courage and trust. "You are stronger together than apart," Kaelin said, voice echoing with power and relief. "Alara, your choice, your courage, it frees me." Alara closed her eyes, feeling the shadows lift. She understood then that the curse had never been unconquerable. It had only required a heart brave enough to embrace the light within the darkness. With a deep breath, she stepped forward and placed her hands upon the wraith. "I see your pain," she said softly. "But you are not alone. You are part of this world, and love can heal even what seems broken." The spirit shrieked once, a sound of both sorrow and release. Light poured from Alara's hands, filling the hall, and the wraith dissolved, leaving only a faint glow behind. The runes dimmed and a quiet stillness settled over the chamber. Kaelin turned to her, his eyes glimmering with something tender and human, something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. "Alara," he said, voice low and reverent, "you have passed every trial. You have faced fear, illusion, and sorrow. You have shown courage, heart, and wisdom. You are my Luna." Alara's chest tightened with emotion. The word felt powerful, sacred, and real. She glanced down at the pups, who whined softly and nuzzled her legs, acknowledging the bond that had guided them through every test. She smiled through her tears, feeling the connection between herself, Kaelin, and the pack grow stronger than ever. But even in this moment of triumph, the world beyond the castle called with whispers of danger. From the cliffs, a distant howl echoed, a warning that challenges remained, even as destiny had been fulfilled. Yet for now, the darkness that had haunted the Alpha King for centuries had been lifted, and the bond between Luna and King was unbreakable. Kaelin extended his hand, and Alara took it, feeling the warmth and strength that radiated from him. Together they stepped to the balcony, the wind carrying the scent of pine and snow, the sound of distant wolves filling the air. "The pack they know," Kalen said quietly. "They will follow you and they will protect what is ours. But remember, the journey does not end here. It only begins." Alara nodded, her heart steady and sure. "I am ready," she said, "not just for you but for them, for the pack, and for the life we will build together." The pups leapt from the blanket, scattering across the balcony, their playful energy a reminder of the trials they had faced. Alara laughed softly, the sound ringing clear in the morning light. Kalen watched her, a small, rare smile brushing his lips. Together they descended from the balcony into the heart of the castle, where the pack awaited. Wolves of all sizes and shades gathered, eyes bright with recognition and respect. One by one, they approached Alara, acknowledging her as their Luna. She knelt, letting them sniff her hands, stroke her hair with gentle paws, and feel the bond that had been forged through courage, love, and determination. Kalen stepped beside her, and the pack formed a circle around them, a living symbol of unity and trust. The curse was gone, lifted by the strength of a heart brave enough to face both darkness and light. Alara looked up at Kalen and he met her gaze. There were no words needed. The bond between them was silent, strong, and unbroken. And yet, far beyond the cliffs, another howl sounded, a reminder that the world outside still held mysteries, challenges, and perhaps even threats. But for now, in the quiet glow of the castle, the Alpha King and his Luna stood together, united by choice, trust, and love. The pups danced around them, small shadows in the morning sun, symbols of a journey completed and a life begun. And as Alara watched the wind ripple through the forest, she knew that whatever challenges awaited, she and Kalen would face them together, hearts aligned and destiny fulfilled. The castle, once dark with shadows and curses, now seemed alive with hope, a place where the past had been healed and the future held infinite possibilities. Alara smiled, feeling the warmth of the pups, the presence of the pack, and the strength of Kalen beside her. She had faced fear, sorrow, and the weight of centuries, and she had chosen courage, compassion, and love. Her journey had begun, and the story of the Alpha King and his Luna would echo through the cliffs, forests, and hearts of the pack for generations to come.